In 27 BC, one man stood before the Roman Senate and became the ruler of a territory stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates River. His name was Octavian. 500 years after that moment, nothing would remain of his empire except ruins and legends. But the real mystery isn't that Rome fell. The mystery is that in its final 100 years, this empire went from absolute power to total collapse. And most people living through it never realized they were witnessing the end of the world they knew. Today, we're breaking down exactly how the greatest power of the ancient world crumbled from the inside, before anyone outside ever delivered the final blow. To understand how far Rome fell, you first need to understand how high it climbed. At its peak, under Emperor Trajan, the empire controlled more than 5 million square kilometers of territory. That's over 60 million people, roughly a fifth of the entire world's population at the time, living under Roman law, trading in Roman currency, and traveling on Roman roads. London, Damascus, Alexandria, and Carthage, cities separated by thousands of miles and entirely different cultures, all answered to the same system of government. That system seemed eternal. It had survived civil wars, slave rebellions, and barbarian invasions. Imagine running a company whose headquarters sits in one city, while its branches are scattered across the globe. With no airplanes, no phones, no internet. Any decision made in Rome took weeks, sometimes months, to reach the empire's borders. By the 3rd century, that delay had become deadly. Messengers carrying news of a barbarian invasion in the north could arrive in Rome only to find the crisis had already turned into a disaster. Emperor Diocletian tried to solve this problem with a radical fix. In 293 AD, he split the empire into 4 administrative regions, each with its own ruler. Emperor Constantine went even further, relocating the capital from Rome itself eastward to a new city, Constantinople, in 330 AD. The administrative strain forced the empire to divide into eastern and western halves. And 100 years later, when the western half found itself in mortal danger, the East no longer considered it their problem. If you think today's political instability feels unprecedented, listen to what happened in Rome between 235 and 284 AD, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. It began with the assassination of Emperor Severus Alexander by his own soldiers in 235. That opened the floodgates. Over the next 50 years, the throne changed hands more than 20 times. And that's only counting the ones the Senate officially recognized. The army literally chose and murdered emperors within months of their rule if they failed to pay enough or showed weakness on the battlefield. Emperor Decius was killed in battle alongside his own son. Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persians and, according to legend, turned into a human footstool for the Persian king. Imagine a company where the CEO gets murdered every year. How can anything long-term get built when every decision could cost you your head within a week? It was in this chaos that the empire lost its ability to plan ahead, and that very instability opened the door for everything that came next. While generals were killing each other for the throne, another enemy was tearing through the empire without a single sword. Between 249 and 262 AD, an epidemic later named the Plague of Cyprian swept through the provinces, spreading along military and trade routes. Entire cities lost their populations. Military garrisons thinned out, not from enemy arrows, but from disease and desertion. And as people died, the treasury emptied out. To keep paying soldiers who were growing harder to keep loyal, emperors began mixing cheaper metals into silver coins. What had once been nearly pure silver became a thin silver coating wrapped around plain copper. People noticed. Trust in Roman currency collapsed, prices skyrocketed, and the trade networks that had held the empire together for centuries began falling apart, province by province. By the 5th century, the empire that once dictated terms to barbarian tribes on its borders had become prey. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, marched into Rome itself, a city that hadn't seen an enemy inside its walls in over 800 years, and sacked it. This wasn't a military blow that destroyed the empire overnight. It was a symbolic collapse, proof to the entire world that Rome was no longer invincible. 45 years later, in 455, the Vandals did the same thing. Meanwhile, the Huns under Attila pressed in from the east, forcing other tribes to flee onto Roman territory in desperate search of safety. And every one of those migrations added more chaos to a system that was already falling apart at the seams. The end didn't come with a bang. It came almost silently. In 476 AD, the Germanic general Odoacer simply removed the teenage emperor Romulus Augustulus from the throne, and didn't even bother becoming emperor himself. He just sent the imperial regalia off to Constantinople with a message. The West doesn't need an emperor anymore. No one at the time wrote down that date as the day Rome fell. Only later would historians mark 476 AD as the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Here's what's truly striking about this story. Not one of these factors on its own would have destroyed Rome. Political instability, plague, inflation, and barbarian invasions. The empire had survived each of these before. But when all 4 processes collided at the same time and started feeding off each other, a system that had seemed eternal began collapsing from within. Slowly, over the span of several generations, so that no single person ever felt the full scale of the catastrophe until it was already over. This isn't just a lesson about the ancient world. Any large system, a country, a company, a civilization, can look unshakable right up until the moment the cracks running through its foundation finally give way. So which modern system do you think looks the most like late Rome? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed digging into this piece of history, subscribe. There are plenty more stories like this one coming.